People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the show. Our topic tonight is Budget 2024. To discuss, we've invited to our studio economist Dhanusha Pathirana. Good evening and welcome, Dhanusha.
Good evening, Sonali.
Dhanusha, in the backdrop of the unveiling of Budget 2024 by the President yesterday, so many issues have arisen. Let's break it down for the benefit of our viewers. The 2024 budget envisages a revenue of 4.1 trillion rupees, an expenditure of 7 trillion rupees. Basically, in simple language, the purpose of a budget is to enable fiscal consolidation of the state and also to address key economic issues. Have these objectives been met?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sonali, for having me. Yes, I think you started off the whole approach to the discussion is really great. So I think the first two issues which you raised, whether the budget is actually addressing the key economic issues and whether this is leading to fiscal consolidation. So looking at this, we have to see what are the key economic issues right now we are facing. So obviously right now the price level, the sky high level of prices is well increasing the poverty level of the population, and it's also well affecting the productive capacity of the economy, where we are seeing so many factories being closed down and also unemployment rising. And then on the other hand, as we said, the poverty level. So whether these three issues, employment, poverty and inflation, and at the same time economic output, the declining output levels, whether these issues are addressed by the budget. And secondly, as you said, whether it is sufficient to reach fiscal consolidation. So we have to, I think, first of all look at the revenue position and expenditure and the debt levels to get an overview of whether these concerns are addressed through the budget. So first of all, if you look at the revenue, so this budget is expecting almost a 45% increase in the revenue through taxes and non-tax incomes. So, but this is coming off through where the 2023 revenue levels have been significantly low than the expected levels of roughly around 560 billion. So now they are expecting a 45% increase in 2024. Now most of this increase is targeted through taxes on goods and services. Now those taxes, income from those taxes is expected to move up by as much as 62%, whereas income taxes are expected to rise by around 25%. So this means the budget is actually regressive, where income generation process of the government would be leading to further inflation. So that means to say they have, I think what they have done is they have expanded the tax net on the wrong foot. That is to say, tax net they have expanded on the goods and services, when most of the discussions have been happening where they have been saying the tax net should be expanded on the incomes, where certain people who are actually not coming under the tax net should be brought under that. What they have done is exactly the reverse, where they have expanded the tax net on the goods and services. So by this measure, what we can expect is some of the goods that did not come under, say, VAT and other so-called indirect taxes might be coming under. So for instance, they might extend it to electricity, even water, these like public utilities. So we can expect a tremendous increase in or a significant increase in the price levels if they are going to implement these proposals, especially the revenue proposals. And what would that entail for the private sector? Because that would mean their cost of production would be going up, or at least the living costs will be going up. So there will be even more demand to increase the salaries and wages in the private sector. So which I think is a good thing in a way to increase wages, but this would mean that the workers will be expecting a higher increase because of what the government is will have implemented, is expecting to implement through the budget. So that would mean that the productive capacity and the competitiveness of the economy would be further deteriorating, and we can expect the interest rates to further move up because of the inflation, and also exchange rate to sort of depreciate, because with inflation we expect that to happen. And the other thing which I would like to discuss about the expenditure level is that there is a tremendous increase of, as we know, of the debt limit, the debt ceiling of the government, and then this they have increased up to 7.3 trillion rupees from somewhere around 3.5 trillion. So out of that, 3 trillion will be trying to finance the ISBs which are due in payment. So what would happen is that a large amount of the budget, what do you call, the resources will be channeled to basically servicing our debt and not addressing the key issues in the economy, like the collapsing production structure and the living standards of the people, and also the price level. Because what we can see is now they have raised government wages or salaries by 10,000 rupees, but the impact on the income levels through these tax measures will be far greater than that. So a 10,000 rupee increase will not be sufficient to face this expected price level increase through the tax measures. So while they are handing out these increases on the expenditure side, they are collecting much more than through the income side of the government, that is through taxes. Yeah.
Right. So let's also talk a bit about the positive aspects or the promising aspects of this budget. The cost of living allowance, senior citizens allowances to be increased, 50 billion rupees allocated to assist small and medium enterprises, Aswasuma welfare benefit scheme, then 4 billion rupees allocated to help citizens of the estate sector, granting them land ownership and assisting in housing development, 10 billion for development of rural roads, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
Investment in the sphere of artificial intelligence. So these are also positive measures and necessary measures for the country to move forward. For example, the artificial intelligence. Then there was a proposal on reparations for victims of the conflict. These are things that needed to be done. How do you weigh in on this? Where is this money coming from?
Yeah, I think what I think we need to highlight is that if you look into the previous year's budget, there is a shortfall of expenditure of roughly around 500 billion. So now what they have done is that they allocate certain expenditure levels through the budget, and then these proposals do not come through. Now because now if we see the 2023 budget, there is a revenue shortfall of, as we know, around 560 billion. So to match that up, what they have done is they have cut their expenditure by around 500 billion.
Okay.
So we don't know the actual exact expenditure which the government has in fact implemented or carried through during the year. What we see is the expectations or the budget proposals. Whether these expenditures have actually gone through is not revealed by these documents. So then again, about what we can again say is that despite an increase in let's say allowance for pensioners and so on, now these things will be again taken back by the government through the tax increases. So on one side they are trying to show that this is a people-friendly budget, but in fact the taxes are not being revealed, because in the numbers they show up, but these things are not in the budget speech. So it doesn't make
the net benefit to the citizen may be negligible.
May be negative. Because we have to see now, if this amount of taxes are going to be going to be come through these goods and services, then obviously it should be paid by the general or the general population. So that would mean while government is giving handouts on one hand, they're collecting 2-3 times more than that. So but at the same time, what we have to also see is that where the expenditure is going. Now we can classify the expenditure by the ministries and also by the component like salaries and other interest payments. Now what is most interesting about this is that the interest payments is coming up to around 2.7 trillion, or to be precise 2,651 billion rupees, whereas salaries and wages, the total wage bill is roughly 1.1 trillion. So which is 160% more than the wage bill, the interest component. So now we know government and the central bank implemented a DDR which have entirely targeted the EPF funds and slash the interest income of the EPF, which we have calculated, and now there's a case going on. What we are saying is that within the period of 15 years they will lose around 50% of the income. So now what has happened now, that they said they will this will stabilize the government debt position. Now what has happened to the government debt position under this budget? The interest component has increased by around 21%, the expenditure up to 2.65 trillion, which is almost 2.5 times greater than the wage bill. And so what is happening here is out of that 2.65, roughly 2.5 trillion is going into the domestic debt servicing, not the foreign exchange, because this is clearly mentioned in this in the budget accounts. For financing the foreign debt, they are paying somewhere around 250 billion for the interest. All the rest of it is going into financing the local debt, domestic debt. So most of it is owned by what we know is the banking sector and the conglomerates, or the private sector. So this interest income will be going, majority of it will be going into their hands.
Okay, so what is the impact of that? If you can just break it down for
absolutely us? Because now you are increasing the VAT and so-called indirect taxes, raising the price levels, so basically taxing the normal people, and then where does that money, where is it going? So most of the expenditure is absorbed by the interest component and through to the domestic debt. So it's going into hands of particular people which are not entirely using it productively, because this interest income, you cannot call it a productive income, and because government resources are being centered or concentrated on that particular item, which means that it is not capable of addressing the key issues in the government,
right, but
of
then
the economy.
The interest component has to be paid?
No, that is what we are saying, because now they wanted to restructure the domestic debt.
Yeah.
So that is to stabilize the the debt component of the government. So in this case, what it has not happened, that is what is showing here. So the DDR has not been successful in reducing the government debt expenditure. So what they should have done is that they should have extended the interest rates reduction to at least all the bonds. What we are demanding is the excluding the EPF and ETF, because they are holding very the proportion of high interest rate bonds they are holding is very less. So reduce the interest rates of the bonds which were issued in 2022 and 2023 to the current market levels.
Right. Now this matter is before court, right?
At the moment it's before court.
Okay.
So the thing is, now what we can clearly show is, now this is greater than the entire budget deficit if we exclude the recapitalization expenditure, which is for the banks. Now the budget has proposed 450 billion to recapitalize the banks, to basically stabilize this. I suppose this is going in mostly to the state banks, because they are in distress, sort of. So to strengthen their capital level, they have proposed 450 billion. Excluding that, the fiscal deficit is 2.4 trillion. So look at this, the domestic debt interest component is greater than the fiscal deficit.
Okay.
So what are we doing by borrowing? So this is the funds or the resources that should be going into expanding the productive sector, and also providing social security benefits to the people who are in poverty. But this is going into going in as interest payments.
All right. We are in conversation with economist Dhanusha Pathirana. We'll be back after a short commercial break. Stay with us.
The
People's Platform.
ICC Men's Cricket World Cup India 2023 match between Australia versus Afghanistan tomorrow at 7 a.m. onwards. Repeat telecast on TV1.
මම තමයි අද මෙතන මනමාලි.
මේ ඒක කියන්න වෙලාවනේ.
මම මේ පාත් එක හැදුවේ මගේ දුවට මෙතනින් යන්න විතරයි.
මට විශ්වාසයක් තියෙනවා ඔය අනිවාර්යෙන් මෙයි කියලා.
එයාගේ ගෞරවය ගැන හිතන්නේ නැතුව එයා ඉම්ලිගේ ගෞරවය රැක්.
මම මගේ කසාදේ ඇතුලේ තනි වෙලා ඉන්නේ. දැන් ඉතින් මේ වැඩකාරී කිසි දෙයක් දන්නේ නැහැ වගේ මෙතන ඩ්‍රාමා එකක් කරනවා. මේක තමයි අන්තිම අවස්ථාව ඉම්ලි.
එයා මගේ ජීවිතේ මෙහෙම විනාශ කළා වගේ ඔයාගේ ජීවිතේ විනාශ කරන්නත් බැරි නේ.
අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
ගුඩ් මෝනින් මාත්‍යා.
එතන සුමාව දන්නවද?
දන්නවා.
කොහමද?
දැන් මේ මගේ ඉස්සරහින්
මම වාතරින්. මට යන්න දීපන්. එතකොට මම වාතරින්.
දෙන්න වැඩ.
අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා මිස්ටර් ආදිත්‍ය අරස්.
නීල පබලු අද රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
ICC Men's Cricket World Cup India 2023 match between Australia versus Afghanistan tomorrow at 7 a.m. onwards. Repeat telecast on TV1.
The People's Platform.
Welcome back. You're with the People's Platform. I'm in conversation with economist Dhanusha Pathirana. Dhanusha, when we speak of a country's budget, it's not just some fairy tale whimsical document. It has real life consequences for all of the people in the country. Could you tell us if budget 2024, the proposal, is in line with the IMF supported program, our debt restructuring process? How does that feature?
Yes. So now what we have to look at, I think, is the second review and what the IMF has basically demanded from the government to come up with a revenue generation plan and to improve the fiscal consolidation program. So what they have clearly highlighted is three areas in improving revenue. So we have to see whether this budget has actually absorbed those proposals or have completely neglected them. As far as I see, they have completely neglected them. Because the three main conditions they have demanded from the government in terms of raising revenue, that first thing was to improve tax administration. That is to say, you expand the people who are outside the tax net and so on. But what they have done is the complete opposite, as we discussed. They have expanded the tax net on the indirect taxes, or basically expanding the basket of goods which will be taxed in terms of indirect taxes. But then again, the second demand was to arrest the tax evasion process that is going on in the country, and which clearly the Inland Revenue have come up with estimates and numbers, the amount of tax evasion, which is huge, which has been repeatedly discussed. So, and there is not a word or a single letter about tax evasion in this budget speech and in the budget proposals. Okay. So nothing also about the tax administration, where how to expand the tax net into areas where it is difficult to generate income taxes. So that is not addressed. What they have done is the complete reverse, and also completely neglected tax evasion. There was not a word about it. So we can see, I mean, there is clear collusion with among that is with the government and these interests who are actually benefiting from these proposals or measures of the government. We are completely neglecting tax evasion. And then third was to completely phase off tax holidays which have been given to especially the BOI firms. And IMF has clearly raised that as one of the key issues why government tax revenue as a ratio of the GDP has come down. But this, of course, this came up as a IMF proposal in mid 1990s when the current account was liberalized. That was a period where there was a global trend of liberalizing external trade and so on. So as a result, we also caught up with it, and then our tax revenue started coming down drastically. And now IMF is coming and saying you have to reverse these policies to improve the tax revenue. But all these three policies have been completely neglected in this budget. And so how they are trying to raise the revenue is by further taxing the people who are already burdened by high inflation and taxes. And so this, if they are going to implement this, is going to have a severe major impact on the living conditions of the people and also the productive capacity of the private sector and the export competitiveness, because this will raise the production costs in a way which would put pressure on the exchange rate and also interest rates, because if we now they have doubled the borrowing limit, which means the government will be putting pressure more on the savings to absorb the savings in the entire banking system into itself. So which means there will be greater demand for borrowings by the government. That means interest rates are highly likely to go up even further. So again, constraining the liquidity into the private sector, or they call the investments. So again, the costs will rise. So clearly these proposals will make things worse, because again, now you asked, I think initially the question you raised was whether this will improve the fiscal consolidation. But you have to, one of the main indicators of that is the fiscal deficit as a proportion of the GDP. Now what has happened to that? They have done some creative accounting here to show that it is going down. They showed that from 8.5 this year it is expected to go down to around 7.6. But in truth, how they have showed that is they have excluded the 450 billion they have allocated to support the banking system. So when you include that, this goes up to 9% of the GDP, 9.1. So because this 450 billion, they'll have to again borrow from the banks and then again supply to the banks if in case. So what we have seen is that it is making things worse, even at the fiscal consolidation front, even at where people's living standards are concerned, and also from the perspective of the productive structure.
Dhanusha, keeping inflation at bay is one of the key requisites that the government is supposed to comply with. However, recently cabinet approval was granted for the VAT component to be increased from 15% to 18% beginning from next year. When VAT is increased, the prices of goods and services increase. Doesn't that increase inflation? So how is this objective going to be met?
Exactly. So this would the direct result of this will be increasing living costs. Well, whether that would translate into increasing production costs is something we'll have to wait and see, but it would, because if that in fact translates into higher interest rates, it would of course increase the production costs also. But now this will increase the living costs and also create further demand for higher wages and salaries, and which would again, well, if the companies comply to those demands, obviously the production costs will also rise, and then that would mean that it would be further difficult to compete in the world market with countries like India, Vietnam and China, where their export sectors are well expanding rapidly. In an environment like that, we will be faced with continuously increasing production costs. So what we can expect would be a further closure of the factories or the sector where it is competing externally. Now we know an economy has two sectors. One is tradable and the non-tradable sector. The non-tradable sector is inward looking, where it is not competing or generating foreign exchange through competing in the world market. Say for instance the transport and so on, you can say. But then this will hit the sector which is tradable. The tradable sector is the one that is generating foreign exchange. So if you are putting further pressure or pressure on the cost of production level, then your foreign exchange income or the country's foreign exchange income will be at a risk. Now our problem was also centered around the supply of foreign exchange into the system, and now with this proposal what we can see is that the export sector, which is the sector that is capable of increasing foreign exchange even at the nominal financial level. I'm not going into the structure and so on of production, which is of course very labor intensive and technologically backward. We can't go into that right now, but even at that level the capacity for it to increase its foreign income will be reducing. So this will on one hand, while putting pressure on the living cost, it will also have an impact on the medium to long term generation of foreign exchange. So these proposal will have major negative, this is my reading of this proposal, will have major negative outcomes on many fronts of the economy.
Let's also talk a bit about the social protection net, which is another key component. It is the government's responsibility to ensure that the vulnerable communities, the marginalized communities are least affected by this economic crisis, by the prevailing economic conditions. How does the budget cater to their needs, and where is how is this being financed?
So first of all, I think we'll have to look into, as we know, there are so many studies or estimates have been done about the poverty level, and it's showing drastic figures like over 30%. So now whether this social security spending is sufficient to address or to cater that immediate humanitarian issue we are facing. So what the IMF is saying is that at least the government should allocate 0.6% of the GDP. That should come to somewhere around 200 billion rupees. But what we are saying also is that we don't see it in this appropriation bill or in the budget proposals. What we see in the directly what we see in the appropriation bill, published in the appropriation bill, is that there's a slash of over 50% that went into, compared to 2023, where it was around 105 billion through Samurdhi and so on. Now this is going to be slashed to somewhere around 55 billion. The figures might change about 7 to 8% because appropriation bill figures change 7 to 8% from because through the budget proposals they get added up onto that. So but what we see is that directly a drastic reduction of the spending, but in the budget statement or the reading, it was said that 4 million people will be benefiting, but till that moment the government's estimate was that it was 900,000 people who got accepted after applying to the Aswasuma program. Only 900,000, less than 900,000, close to 900,000 was only accepted as people who will be benefiting from the Aswasuma program, whereas formerly under the Samurdhi program 1.3 million people benefited, but we know about 40% of that resources is going to these the program officers and so on. There's a huge misallocation of funding there. That's an issue for.
But I think after the appeal process, these figures changed for Aswasuma.
Right. So now in the budget statement they're saying they will increase it up to 4 million, but in the appropriation bill they have clearly slashed the amount. That this is coming under under social security spending in women and children and social welfare budget. So that has been clearly slashed. So we don't know clearly, while the statement says 4 million people would benefit, the appropriation bill says you are going to get a 50% cut.
Right. Dhanusha, my final question to you. Steering the country forward is our collective responsibility, and this needs to be done in collaboration with and in consultation with the multiple stakeholders who are contributing to the economy of the country. How must we as citizens act in light of Budget 2024?
I think now, as citizens, I think we have to have a clear understanding what these proposals would entail, or what are the repercussions, how it's going to have an impact on the economy and the living conditions, and the whether it is addressing, as we said, the current key economic issues, inflation, the lowering or the deteriorating productive capacity of the economy, and which goes hand in hand with rising unemployment, and the poverty levels or the social security aspect of it, whether it is addressing. So as we can see is that this budget is aggravating these issues rather than addressing these. So as public, I think we should be very mindful of what is going on, and then make clear demands. Look, this is not the direction we want the government resources to be allocated, and also we know this is an unmandated government or unmandated president we are having. So without having elections, immediate elections, where I think that is the key demand of the public at the moment, because this administration has lost the faith of the public and lost the mandate. So I think, personally, my personal view is that before putting out budget proposals and so on, they should first get the mandate of the public, and that would determine where the country should be headed.
Thank you for your perspectives, Dhanusha Pathirana, economist. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot, Sonali.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.
Supreme Court rules that decisions made by Gotabaya, Basil, Mahinda and several others violated the fundamental rights of the citizens. Civil groups rushed to the Inland Revenue Department to demand that tax evaders pay their dues. Namal Rajapaksa